Are you ready to outgrow that guy that's always in the gym the same time as you and finally see some real muscle growth after 50? What if I told you there was a way to outmuscle that very next guy without spending your golden years chained to a barbell? Now, if you're ready to unlock the secrets to 2 times more muscle growth than the average guy, keep watching, because what I'm about to show you could change everything. This is part 2 of the series, Get More Muscle Growth Over 50 Than the Average Guy. If you missed part 1, which is there, and also the link is in the show notes, it's worth checking out. But no worries if you're new here, because you're in the right place. By the end of this video, you'll have a full battle plan for making the guy who's just winging it next to you wonder why you're making massive strides in half the time while he's still Googling, why aren't I seeing results? Now, let's dive in. I'm Psymon H, your Muscle After 50 coach, and I've been building natural muscle ever since the age of 12. Now that's 42 years of gathering experience, data, and a bit of knowledge. And my first barbell curl wasn't a normal barbell. It was my mum's broom handle with a couple of shopping bags either side. You could say when it's come to training, I've tried it all. The fads, the gimmicks, and yes, the downright bizarre. But here's the deal. I've done all that failing so you don't have to. Because let's be honest, when you get over 50, you haven't got time for trial and error workouts. I'm living proof that these principles work and my clients' results speak for themselves. Today, I'm going to give you what works. No fluff, no bullshit, no fads. Just the strategies that will leave your gym buddy wondering why you're growing so fast by training less and much smarter. If you know the very basics of slow motion high intensity training, use the time stance to jump forward. In part 1, we covered slow motion high intensity training, aka SH.I.T. Think of it like turning your workout into a stealth operation. Slow, controlled, and deadly effective. Instead of thrashing through the sets like the guy on the next bench who thinks he's in a race and all he's end up doing is putting himself in a position to injure himself, you're taking 10 to 20 seconds per repetition to make every inch of movement count. This isn't about ego lifting, it's about efficiency and safety. While the guy next to you is racking up junk reps, you're creating pure muscle tension. That's why SH.I.T puts you light years ahead. Let's break down the details. By the end of this video, you're going to discover the ideal rep cadence and the goal of rep targets. How to progress each week with precision, the perfect cycle length, and how to program your exercises. How to structure your training days for maximum recovery and growth. Now let's start with rep cadence. Okay, this is where you leave your gym buddy scratching his nuts while still racing through every repetition, not getting anywhere fast. On the other hand, you're going to be mastering one of 2 rep cadences, either a 5-second up cadence and a 5-second down, or once you progress a little bit more, a 10-second cadence of 10 seconds up and 10 seconds down. Now, for the older crowd, slower is much better. But why? It eliminates momentum and forces you to focus on form. Plus, it's safer on the joints and connective tissues. And let's face it, you've got to do everything possible to protect your joints and ligaments at this stage of the game. Now here's the deal with the 5 seconds up and the 5-second down cadence. Your target is a minimum of 6 repetitions using that very same rep cadence. Now this is perfect if you're coming from traditional style training because the slightly slower speed is easier to master. With the 10-second up and 10-second down cadence, this is perfect if you started using the 5-second up and 5-second down cadence and you want to now step things up. So with the 10-second up and 10-second down cadence, you're aiming for a minimum of 3 repetitions per set to failure. Both cadences provide a minimum of 60 seconds of pure, unbroken time under tension, the sweet spot for muscle growth. Time under tension works both the concentric, which is the lifting phase, and the eccentric portion, which is the lowering phase, maximizing every second of effort. So you may already know that there are some serious gains to be had in the concentric portion of the movement. That's where you see most people lowering the exercise slightly slower. But did you know that there are some equally serious gains to be had in the concentric phase, especially when you're heading north of 50? A slow concentric repetition is particularly beneficial for people over 50 because, number 1, injury prevention, ensuring that the muscles, not the joints, do the work. Number 2, greater metabolic stress that can counteract the natural decline in muscle mass and strength. That's aka sarcopenia. Number 3, it has cardiovascular benefits because it elevates heart rate and provides an auxiliary cardiovascular benefit without adding impact or strain, making it safer for older adults. And number 4, it strengthens tendons and ligaments by providing sustained, controlled stress.
Classified information.
Progressive overload and intensity is the name of the game. There's no ifs or buts. Let's start with intensity. Intensity is where most older lifters mess up. They're afraid to push hard, or worse, they push without purpose. S.H.I.T solves this. Slow motion, high intensity training solves this issue by letting you go hard, slow, and safely. Intensity builds muscle. Half-hearted business doesn't. So let's swiftly move on to rep targets. If you beat your rep target, the next week you increase your weight. But I'm going to give you a very brief example of how you would implement a weight increase. Let's just say you're using a 5-second up and a 5-second down cadence, and the rep target is 6. Now say this week you do 8 repetitions. If it's an upper body movement, the very next week you might want to increase that weight by 2 to 5 pounds. Now, if it's a lower body movement, because naturally legs are stronger, you might want to increase by 5 to 10 pounds on your next session. Now, if you hit that rep target of 6, meaning that you did no more than 6 or no less than 6, the very next time you do that same workout, you keep the same weight and you aim for 7 repetitions. And here's an example of the week that you may not hit your rep target. So again, if you're using a 5-second up and a 5-second down cadence and the rep target was 6 and you were gradually increasing your weight, and say it was week number 3 and you increase your weight, but somehow you got 5 repetitions instead of 6. The next week, you just take off a couple of pounds. If it's an upper body movement, take off 2.5 pounds. If it's a lower body movement, you might take off 5 pounds. And you go again and try to hit that rep target. And you keep that same weight until you have completed that rep target. Here's a pro tip, especially if you're starting slow motion high intensity training for the first time. Week number 1 in most cycles is kind of that week where it's trial and error. You're trying to zero in for the following week on your weight. So it's easy to misjudge how much weight you actually need. And this is why it's super important to log everything down. You don't want to be kind of having to rely on memory. You want to look in your logbook and say, I did 10 repetitions. I know I was supposed to do 6, but that weight was too light. So I ended up having to do 10 repetitions. Okay, well that means then on week 2, you're in a better position to put on, say if it was an upper body movement, you might want to put on 10 pounds, a 10-pound increase. And now you go again. Super important to log everything down. That means then by week 2, you're zeroing in and getting closer to where you should be. By week 3, you may well be, after all this recovery, getting stronger and be able to increase your weight or increase your repetitions. But also remember that in a cycle, things seldomly stay the same. So don't go into a cycle thinking, well, I use 20 pounds and I'm going to keep on using 20 pounds week in and week out. No, that's not the objective. The objective is if you beat that rep target, try to increase the weight. Now, if you get to a point where you can't increase the weight, because there will come a time when you can't increase the weight, then that means you must go after the next best thing, and that is an extra repetition. And after that, you may get close to the end of a cycle where you can't get an extra repetition. So what do? You then concentrate on getting better form. So that means that you may have been going down to about here on a fly. Well, let's see if we can really zero in on the form of a fly. So then you may be able to get a little bit lower on that fly, get more of a stretch. That's progressive overload at its finest. So let's quickly skip along to cycle length. Cycle 1 is going to last around 4 to 5 weeks. And then from there on, every cycle after that should last 6 to 7 weeks. Why is that? Well, the first cycle gets you used to training in a slow motion fashion, especially if you've come from a traditional way of training where your reps are a lot faster. The first cycle helps you to get used to training exercises at a slower speed, helps you get used to meeting your rep targets, enables you to start putting a little bit more intensity into your workouts. Now, remember, the first 2 weeks of every cycle is going to be a little bit of hit and miss, especially if you're changing exercises from cycle 1 to cycle 2, which you should be. So it takes a couple of weeks to get used to it. And then when you get to cycle 2, those first 2 weeks are just about getting your eye in the game. And then from week 3, right through to week 7 is all about business. The business of progressive overload, intensity, and in turn, growth. Now you may ask, do you need a deload after each cycle? Now that's a very good question. When you use traditional training and a lot more sets and volume, obviously, you build a lot of fatigue. Now, when you're training with high intensity training, you're using a lot less volume, so you accumulate a lot less fatigue. Now, I haven't taken a deload week since I started 4 years ago. I was taking deload weeks every 5 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks, when I was training with much more volume. So the answer to that question in short is no. But there could be the odd occasion when you may need to take a deload week. But that's going to be very individualized. But on the whole, no need to take a deload. Okay, in this last section, we're going to cover a very important topic, and that is exercise programming. But let's just go back a play or two and fill in the gaps. So there are 2 workouts, as I suggested earlier, workout A and workout B. So workout A is going to be lower body, chest, triceps. Workout B is going to be shoulders, back, biceps. Now, my philosophy in training with slow motion high intensity training is use fewer exercises and cover more ground equals better results. So that means that you might want to concentrate, especially at the beginning in cycle 1 and cycle 2, on a lot more compound movements that cover multiple muscle groups. Now, let me give you a quick example of the kind of exercises that I would do for cycle 1. So cycle 1, we're doing lower body. So for a lower body exercise, I'm going to look at a squat variation. The squat variation that I'm going to use is going to be toe squats. Now, I've done virtually every squat variation there is. And toe squat, for me, covers every muscle group in the lower body. It covers your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings, your calves, your adductors, your hips. It covers quite a lot of ground. And that's the kind of exercise that you want to put in first. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing a toe squat. You can either use a dumbbell, like I'm showing. You can use a plate-loaded, like a belt squat attachment. You can do a toe squat off of that. You can do a toe squat off of a leg press if you set it at the right height. And you can do it on a Smith machine. The art of a toe squat is to do everything, the whole squat, on your toes. Your heel doesn't touch the ground until you are done. So that's the first exercise. For chest, I will do some kind of press. And it will probably be an incline press. You can use dumbbells, machines, a barbell. That will be completely up to you. I like to use a dumbbell because I like that thing of instability and building a bit more stability in the shoulder girdle. And you want to do a tricep exercise that covers the bulk of your tricep, which is that long head of your tricep. So something like a skull crusher will do, or a tricep push down, where your hands are traveling behind. You don't stop here. You want to be able to go behind the line of your body, which will initiate more muscle fibers in your long tricep head. So that's workout 1. For workout 2 now, what I would do, I will start with shoulders. So some kind of press. Now, I'm a bit of an advocate of not pressing, especially after the age of 50, not pressing with your elbows out wide here. Stop that if you want bulletproof shoulders for the rest of your life. If you don't care about your shoulders, do any kind of pressing that you fancy. But if you want to look after your shoulders, you want to do presses where your elbow is in front of the body, not at the side of the body. So I like to do things like seated champagnes, or presses, or any kind of presses where I'm in this kind of range. I thumb up lateral raise instead of a normal lateral raise. And I also like to do it at like a 45-degree angle coming out here rather than towards the side here. It just puts me in a better alignment. Now on cycle 1, I wouldn't necessarily put in a rear delt exercise because I would start with a back exercise like a row. So when it comes to back, I would do something like a reverse row. Now for biceps, you can do a barbell curl. What I would do is I will try to focus on an exercise that puts the long bicep head, which is responsible for that peaky peak. I would do an exercise like a barbell curl, an incline barbell curl, or I would use something like a bell curl. Now, the reason why I love this, and this is my favorite bicep exercise, is simply because it doesn't put your wrists in a stationary position. You can move your wrists whichever way you want. And just having that band as well, that heavy band, does make a whole big difference, especially when you pin your elbows back behind the line of your body. And really at the top of the movement, you see I'm not going all the way up here, but at the top of the movement, you really want to be spreading that band apart. That kind of initiates more supination in your bicep, which in turn activates more muscle fibers, which in turn may give you a little bit more peaky peak. Okay, so the question you might be wanting to ask, well, how many sets do I do, Simon? Okay, this is why you're going to outsmart the guy next door who's doing 15 sets or whatever sets he's doing. You only need to be doing in that first cycle, you only need to be doing 1 set per muscle group. Now, while you may be thinking, 1 set, are you sure? Oh yeah, I'm sure. Because each week that you attack that set, those 2 same workouts, you want to be focused on one thing and one thing only. Apart from your form, you want to be focused on that intensity. Now, you may walk into the gym on week 1 of cycle 1, and when you leave, you think to yourself, oh, I've trained hard. When you go back next week, especially when you got that logbook, your paperback workout partner looking back at you saying, that's what you did last week. What are you going to do this week? And the competitive side of you says, well, I want to go up because I met that rep target, or I need to put more weight on the bar. There's something inside you, that competitive side of you takes over. And that's what we're looking for in our sets. So in the first cycle, you only need to be doing 1 set. Your main focus is to increase that weight for as many weeks as you can while keeping the form crystal clean and while focusing on leaving as fewer reps in the tank after your sets. Now, let's quickly talk about cycle 2. I'm not going to talk about it too much because cycle 2 and cycle 3 is going to make up part 3 of this series. Cycle 2 is when you may want to introduce a second exercise for a muscle group. Now, giving you a quick overview, so we'll talk about lower body, chest, and triceps. So for lower body, we went with something like toe squats last time. So I might decide to go and do another variation of a squat this time. Now, I'm going to say to myself, well, I want to do something that's direct for my hamstring. So I'm going to do an RDL. So you could do a dumbbell RDL, you can do toe up RDLs, you can do a plate loaded RDL, which you see me using here, where I'm using the belt squat attachment, but I'm actually using it for my RDLs. So I will do a squat, an RDL. Now that's 2 movements. Cycle 3, you can include 2 movements for quads, 1 for hamstring. And then for chest, I would do, if I did a press last time, I might decide to change the incline a little bit on my chest, or I might do decline instead. And then for the second exercise, I do a fly. For triceps, I will most definitely possibly keep it to 1 exercise, but that is going to be completely up to you. Your goal throughout doing high intensity training is to get that high intensity. That high intensity outweighs the volume. Once you're using a high intensity, it doesn't matter about volume. We will tackle cycle 3 in the next part of how to get 2 times more muscle growth after 50 than the average guy. Now, I hope you learned some stuff and you can take some notes. Save this video so you've got something to refer back to if you decide that high intensity training is the way forward for you. And if you've got some balls, then you want to try something that really gets the animal in you going. And I will see you on the next round of how to get 2 times more muscle growth after 50 than the average guy. I will see you on the next round. Peace.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important announcement.
When you download our free cheat sheet, not only will you discover the secrets to transforming your body and your life in your 50s faster than you ever imagined, you'll also discover how to gain muscle in your 50s. This will shock you, not only because of how easy it is, but the speed at which you'll see results. You'll also find how to lose weight in your 50s. We'll reveal the method that completely flips everything you thought you knew on its head. No fad diets, no grueling cardio sessions. And if you've been feeling like a dead car battery, it's time to get your energy back. We'll show you how. Now, the link for this free cheat sheet is in the description.